Rather than the agony of not having, learn the agony of loss. When people see something they don't have, they often think how great it would be if that thing were theirs. This is the agony that comes from not having, in other words, the desire to possess. Therefore, to free ourselves from this agony, we need to question whether something would still be desirable if it were not ours. So, consider what you have now as if you have lost it. Instead of looking at a nice house and wishing you lived there, look at your own house and think, if I didn't have this house, where would I live? Living in such a house is truly a blessing, as imagining the loss of your modest home will make you value it more than the beautiful house you just saw. In other words, to understand the value of what you own, such as your property, your current health, your loving partner, friends, family, and everything that makes up your life, you must first imagine how it would be without them. If I didn't have this property, how would I be? If I thought I was lying down because I was sick, I would be grateful for my current health. If I thought I didn't have a lover, friend, or family, wouldn't that be an unimaginable misfortune? Only then can I avoid wasting my property, take better care of my health, treat my lover and friends better, and prevent resentment towards them. After that, it's self-torture. Be careful. Put the saddle on gently, and then speak boldly. This saying comes from Goethe's aphorisms. Once you start something and do your best, if you fail, you must forget it completely. Human life is always accompanied by chance and error. When we experience unhappiness or failure, we often regret, thinking that things wouldn't have turned out this way if only we had known or acted differently. However, afterwards, we tend to torture ourselves with self-criticism, similar to what King David of Israel did. Despite fervently praying to heal a sick prince, King David did not sink into despair when the prince died. Instead, he quickly regained his composure. If one is unable to resign oneself to fate like King David, one must appeal to one's reason and acknowledge that our lives are inevitably governed by fate. Without aspirations, there is no reason to live. Just as the human body breaks down without pressure, so too does the human spirit collapse without the pressure of suffering. Therefore, humans must endure labor, poverty, mental burdens, and similar pressures, which act as the ballast needed for the ship of life to sail. Therefore, we can conclude that the things we desperately want to avoid must be embraced as if they were our destiny in order to live. If we were to be satisfied with everything we desire and every wish were to be fulfilled without having to sweat for it, what exactly would we do to live? Would we simply eat and look at the sky, pondering what to do with all those long years ahead? With plenty of time and money, living in a desired big house, able to make anyone we love our partner with just a wink, able to become the head of a company with ease, and able to travel as we please, if there is nothing more we want, nothing more we desire, and nothing more we aspire to, how would we live? In such a case, humans would either bring about their own demise through apathy or create greater suffering for themselves, such as through war and disaster. We have come to the conclusion that personal and social suffering is necessary for humans. Instead of accepting this suffering as pain, we should embrace it willingly and joyfully. Just as someone who has shed tears of sadness can also shed tears of joy, humans feel pain but cannot appreciate its absence. We worry, but not worrying is a feeling we cannot experience. We feel fear but not safety. We experience thirst, desire, and hope, but lose interest once these desires are fulfilled. Even the three important aspects of life, health, youth, and freedom, are not felt when we have them. Only when we lose them, like being healthy but still going to the hospital or having freedom but losing it, do we truly appreciate their value. Humans often fail to realize their happiness when they are happy, but understand that they were happy at that time only when they become unhappy. This implies that there is no current happiness for oneself, and happiness exists only as a memory of the past. The sense of pleasure and delight diminishes as it becomes a habit, eventually becoming indistinguishable from its absence. Eventually, even the habit of pleasure ends, leaving only suffering. Indulgence slows down time, while pleasure eliminates the concept of time. Therefore, we can reach the conclusion that extreme thirst is necessary to realize that water sustains life, painful experiences highlight the importance of health, the realization of aging emphasizes the value of youth, and extreme confinement reveals the preciousness of freedom. Therefore, the misfortunes we have disliked and avoided so far are essential prerequisites for experiencing happiness. If we are to experience life's greatest joy just before death, then we can endure all unhappiness and suffering. Big shadows cover small ones. To measure how much happiness someone enjoys in the world, one must consider how much suffering they endure, rather than how much joy they experience. The deeper the contentment in adversity, the greater the happiness one experiences. When someone is distressed over trivial matters, it signifies their current enjoyment of happiness. When major misfortune strikes, minor worries are no longer a concern. Major shadows obscure minor ones. Life is an endless war without ceasefire. To find solace in all misfortune and suffering, one should look at those who are more unfortunate. When a healthy person feels miserable, visiting the intensive care unit can make them realize how fortunate they are and provide the greatest comfort. Therefore, what will happen to humans at that moment? Consider a heron watching for a moment to catch a bullfrog in a leisurely manner in a field. Human beings are in a similar situation, always facing unknown misfortunes. Today may be a happy day, but we are always exposed to the uncertainty of calamities such as illness, disaster, war, sorrow, and pain. Therefore, peace and happiness are nothing more than a momentary rest obtained by chance. We are soon to face the struggle with pain, and until we escape that pain, an endless trap awaits, requiring continuous challenge. Life is a continuous war with pain without ceasefires, and moments of happiness or satisfaction are extremely fleeting. Therefore, we ultimately come to the conclusion that we are all prisoners condemned to life and death. Reflecting on our childhood, it resembles a theater. Children, like actors, anticipate the unfolding drama of life before them. However, whether the drama will be enjoyable or not, whether they will laugh, cry, or be scared, is entirely unpredictable. Similarly, the fate that unfolds before children is also uncertain. Whether their lives will be happy or unhappy cannot be known or predicted. Yet, one crucial fact remains. A child, upon birth, is sentenced to live in this world until their death, ignorant of the details of their sentence. What we can know is that our lives are ultimately utterly meaningless, which is a realization we must come to terms with. As time passes and we age, the realization gradually becomes clearer. Can anyone dare to say that the love, friendship, success, fame, and power we have pursued so eagerly in our lives are not futile? Truly, everything is futile. There is not a single person, especially among the elderly, who does not say such things. Even the young already know about futility and despair. Despite living with brilliant visions of a golden future and hope, why do we ultimately feel deceived by life? The reason is that the duration of our lives, the performance of life, is too short. So, let's try to extend the performance of life. Imagine if someone lived for 200 or 300 years in this world. They would start to feel like a crazy spectator watching the lives of their children, grandchildren, and the generations after, as if watching the same play 2 or 3 times. This is why our lives, in the end, should be like paying an admission fee to watch a play that can only be seen once. It should be enough to be amazed, surprised, happy, and sad just once. Regrets should also be enough with just once. In life, the realization that we only live once is what gives it value. We don't wish for a perfect life. We simply wish not to suffer. In the early and middle stages of life, like everyone else, we are filled with a strong desire, hope, and ambition for happiness. However, as we enter the later stages of life, though the degree may vary from person to person, we come to realize that the love, happiness, and ambitions we once longed for are mere illusions. Even in the later stages of life, if one has not yet realized this, they are either still living in the early stages of life or are foolish. Therefore, a wise person wishes only for the absence of suffering rather than intense pleasure. If we can simply avoid the disasters and misfortunes we commonly see around us, we consider ourselves fortunate. You might already be in the later stages of life if you find yourself saying, "I just hope not to suffer. I don't even wish for a good life." Similarly, as I grew older, when I heard knocking at the door, I used to think, "Oh, I wonder if something good is coming," But now I mutter, it's probably not a bad thing, showing my apprehension. If there is no pain or joy, that is the happiest state. One of the greatest lessons I consider regarding life is from the philosopher Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, which says, "The wise wish for the absence of pain rather than pleasure. The wise do not seek pleasure, they only wish for the absence of pain." For example, let's say a small thorn is stuck in our hand, causing severe pain. Although the rest of our body is healthy, we pay no attention to it and only focus on the pain from the thorn, ignoring other joys and happiness. Moreover, even if our business is going well, if one thing doesn't go as planned, we become dissatisfied and neglect everything else. Our suffering and agony are dependent on this mindset, on our will. This aspect of willpower is active and direct. Aristotle's teachings seem to be based on this point. We should not pursue pleasure and comfort but simply seek a peaceful state without pain. If this approach is wrong, then Voltaire's saying, "Happiness is a piece of cake, suffering is real," becomes untrue. To live happily means to live while enduring as little suffering as possible. Life can be seen as a practice of how well we endure suffering rather than living to enjoy pleasure. Therefore, happiness is not the portion of those who experience great joy and pleasure, but of those who endure suffering well. If we make joy and pleasure the goal of happiness, we will be caught in greater suffering due to our dissatisfaction with ourselves and jealousy of others. If you are currently in a state without suffering or boredom, you can say that you are happy now. So, in the end, instead of striving to gain pleasure and happiness in life, we should strive to minimize suffering. However, most people cannot do this, which makes them even more unhappy. The big oak is easy to break in a storm. Wise people do not fall into despair because they do not pursue pleasure. A German writer said that a person who desires something better than what they have is like a blind man who sees. In France, there is a famous proverb that says, "Better is the enemy of good." We live each day believing in the expectation and hope of happiness and pleasure, but we must abandon the pursuit of happiness, satisfaction, and pleasure. The surest way to avoid great unhappiness is not to pursue happiness. Goethe, in his youth, learned from his friend Melk that the desire for happiness is a desire for endless greed. Only those who cut off this desire and do not covet can overcome life and become true winners. Therefore, the wisest way is to abandon the desire for pleasure, wealth, fame, power, and success. All unhappiness stems from there and grows. Any greed is poison. This can also be understood by reading the poet Horace's poem. Everyone will realize that, from a profound philosophical perspective, life itself has no value, so rejecting life itself is the greatest wisdom and enlightenment. The philosopher Plato also said that there is nothing to be enthusiastic about in our lives. The 12th century Persian poet Namal, who better expresses this point, says, "Even if you lose the world, do not regret it. The world is meaningless, so be glad even if you alone are placed in the world's shower. The world is meaningless, so both suffering and joy are fleeting. Therefore, in this world, darkness, names, good and evil are all meaningless. There is nothing. With money, you cannot build a house of happiness." The passage reflects on the folly of pursuing wealth and ambition as the foundation of happiness. It suggests that the pursuit of wealth alone does not guarantee happiness and can lead to precarious outcomes, likening it to building a house on unstable ground that can easily collapse. It warns against excessive ambition, noting that lofty goals often result in failure, with most people failing to achieve them and facing more trials than successes. Even if one succeeds after great effort, the achievements may become meaningless over time, and all the passion and energy expended may ultimately benefit others. The passage also criticizes the idea of amassing wealth only to pass it on to one's children, likening it to living as a slave to their needs. It particularly highlights the fleeting nature of artistic glory, as artistic achievements can lose their value with changing times, often leaving artists in obscurity as newer generations take the spotlight. It concludes that human efforts, based on oneself and reality, are often swept away by the grand currents of time and fate. The poet Horace sang about such situations, questioning why we make endless plans that only bring anxiety to our fragile hearts. He reflects that while youth may seem long, life appears short and meaningless in old age, highlighting a severe misconception we face in life. To break free from this misconception, he advises us to heed the conclusions of our elders. Wise individuals foresee the wisdom of old age in their youth and follow the teachings of fate. But those who do not realize this wisdom until they have wasted their lives can only regret and lament. Instead of pursuing pleasure and happiness, we should seek wisdom and enlightenment. Simplicity and moderation lead to happiness. What makes us happy is doing small, insignificant things well. Small and insignificant things refer to activities like reading alone, listening to music, meditating, sweeping the yard, or looking at flowers. It refers to the everyday mundane things themselves. The narrower our perspective and the narrower our range of actions, the happier we will be. Seeing the world in a broad sense increases desires. As our perspective and range of actions widen, worries and anxieties about fulfilling those desires increase. The more people we meet, the more friends we have, and the more people we like, the greater the range of contact with desires and aspirations, leading to greater opportunities and environments that can cause unhappiness. To be happy, we must minimize the fluctuations of will and mind. Grief stems from an active mind, while happiness arises from a passive mind. The tranquility and peace of mind that come from simplicity and quiet are much better than the unhappiness that comes from ambition, busyness, and noise. We already know the despair and emptiness that follow achievement, which makes such a premise possible. When writers, artists, and musicians depict happiness in their works, they often portray serene rural landscapes, solitude, and tranquility. Artists understand that simplicity and monotony are fundamental conditions for happiness. A simple and uneventful life is the path to happiness. Ultimately, human happiness and unhappiness depend on our state of mind, but those who can endure simplicity and monotony must possess the intellectual capacity to handle a contemplative life. This idea is reminiscent of Schopenhauer's concept that those with an empty inner self seek endless stimulation from the outside world. They seek satisfaction externally, and if they fail to find it, they destroy themselves. This can be likened to a musical instrument. A single note on a piano must be played with other instruments in an orchestra to fulfill its role, but a piano can also create its own small musical world through a solo performance, becoming the protagonist of the orchestra and accompanying other instruments. Schopenhauer emphasized the importance of solitude in life, believing that only those who enjoy solitude can create their own world and find happiness within it. We often associate loneliness with negative emotions like solitude, loneliness, and alienation. However, the truly important thing is to live one's life authentically. Our own path can only be found within ourselves. Through solitude, we can reflect on ourselves and deepen our understanding of life. Sometimes, stepping back from the world allows us to meet our true selves. As we become more solitary, we can distance ourselves from the voices of the world and listen to our inner voice. Now is the time to meet our true selves through solitude. This is the subject of inquiry that remains for me.